What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Ilia Topuria sends a warning to Alexander Volkanovski. Recently, Alexander Volkanovski informed the MMA world that he'll be in Abu Dhabi for UFC 308, and if the need arises, he might be willing to step in for a headlining spot. But the man who knocked out Volkanovski this past April is cautioning the legend against it. As you likely know, the man who brutally KO'd Volk at UFC 298 was the current featherweight king Ilia Topuria. Topuria is booked to defend the title against another featherweight great, Max Holloway, on October 26th. Well, ahead of UFC 305 in Perth, Australia, Volkanovski was asked about the possibility of serving as a backup for the UFC 308 main event. At the time, the Aussie star stated, "I reckon I'll be there, you know what I mean? I'm usually hanging around and pestering my managers and the matchmakers. I'm always hanging around. You can't get rid of me, I'll be there." More recently, those comments were run by Topuria. While he spoke with MMA Junkie, the undefeated star was quick to toss Volkanovski's proposal in the not a good idea bin. "Listen, I don't know if that's a good idea. He wants to get knocked out every year. Twice. Maybe someone has to give him good advice. He needs some rest. I'm telling you, he needs some rest. His head at least." Now, even Volkanovski's biggest fans have to admit that Topuria isn't way off base here. While Volk is one of this generation's greatest fighters, he is 35 years old now and was KO'd twice in less than 6 months. The first one being in October 2023 when Islam Makhachev defeated him with a head kick. What do you think? Should Volk agree to be the backup fighter for UFC 308's main event or sit this one out? MMA community calls out Dana White for unfair treatment. Recently, Shavkat Rakhmonov reported that the UFC was hoping to have him battle the new welterweight champ Belal Muhammad October 5th. But according to Rakhmonov, Muhammad's camp turned down the fight due to timing issues. While Shavkat fans are probably disappointed he's not getting a title shot just yet, a lot of other folks are piling on Dana White and the UFC for proposing the fight altogether. After putting together a 10-fight undefeated streak, Muhammad finally got his chance to fight for the title at UFC 304 on July 27th. The rugged vet proceeded to take the welterweight crown from Leon Edwards with a clear-cut decision win. Well, following Rakhmonov's revelation about the UFC's plans, it prompted some pretty fiery feedback. Here was some of it. "That's a 3-month turnaround for Belal. After going 5 rounds with Leon and getting cut in the 5th round, UFC pulled the same move forcing Aljo to fight O'Malley 3 months after the Henry fight. That's a move, UFC, Dana White." The Aljo-O'Malley fight was 96 days between. Alex fighting Rountree is 99 days. They wanted Bully B to fight 70 days after winning the belt against a guy who hasn't fought himself since last December. Islam beat Charles and fought Volk 113 days later, not 70. 2-month turnaround, LOL. UFC got rid of Aljo with the same dirty tactics, and he fell into the trap. Very smart of DDP and Belal to stand up for themselves. I mean, why risk your well-earned title for some extra dollars? The UFC really don't want Belal as champ, do they? Scambill scummy trying to force champions into unfavorable quick turnarounds for a popular contender. What's new? They probably offered Shavkat the fight before Belal even left the octagon. UFC is trying to get Belal beat. In what world do they need to rush Belal? Give him at least 6 months to rest. Make Shavkat vs Usman or Shavkat vs JDM or Shavkat vs Ian for the #1 contender. The UFC is wild, and I say that as a fan of both Belal and Shavkat. Just book it for December. The only good thing about this is that Kamaru Usman won't get the actual title shot. So what's your take on this? Is the UFC trying to ensure Belal's reign is a short one, or are they just trying to run a business? Okay, up next, Alex Pereira will knock out Khalil Rountree? Given the recent casualties Khalil Rountree and his nasty Muay Thai skills have inflicted on the light heavyweight division, some have argued Alex Pereira could be in for a lot more trouble than many expect at UFC 307. But clearly, one man who has trained with Rountree does not see Pereira's reign as champion ending on October 5th. Rountree has been tapped for a title shot after winning 5 straight, in which the noted striker has scored 4 finishes. While Pereira is one of the most feared strikers in the galaxy, some, including Chael Sonnen, have argued that Rountree's game will pose a serious problem for Poatan. Recently, Carlos Prates spoke with Sherdog.com, and while the welterweight proceeded to outline why he doesn't see Khalil Hearing and new at UFC 307, he said this: "To be honest, I trained before with Khalil Rountree. He's a nice guy. He's a good fighter, but I don't think he can fight with Poatan. Poatan is a different level of striking. I also saw an interview of Khalil. He said he has no plans to try to take down, so I think the first round, Poatan's gonna knock him out, and that's it. In light heavyweight, maybe Ankalaev can fight good against him, but that's it. Other guys, I don't think they win a fight against Poatan. Now, Poatan is the guy of the moment, the guy of the UFC right now. As noted, Prates certainly isn't the only person who feels this way. This take seems like the consensus opinion and was one of the reasons so many questions were asked when Ankalaev was booked to fight Alexander Rakic at UFC 308 rather than getting a title shot. But what do you think? Are people looking past Rountree? Israel Adesanya gets called out by UFC fighter. Now that Caio Borralho is a top 5 ranked UFC middleweight, it looks like the surging fighter is targeting the division's former king, Israel Adesanya. Not only that, Borralho says he's certain he would finish the last stylebender if and when the fight takes place. Borralho recently took on longtime contender Jared Cannonier and recorded a unanimous decision win. On account of that victory, the Brazilian fighter leaped into the number 5 spot at 185 pounds. Well, more recently, Borralho spoke with Submission Radio, and while doing so, he was asked to weigh in on Adesanya's tap-out loss to the champion, Dricus du Plessis, at UFC 305. While some people thought Izzy looked engaged and pretty on point in that fight, considering it was his first bout of 2024, Borralho clearly wasn't one of those folks. There was a moment that he gave up the fight, and actually, it was like a minute before he actually got finished. I think he got tired, and I think he lost focus, and he was starting to do things that he doesn't usually do. And when discussing how he sees a scrap between himself and Izzy playing out, Caio argued that he would be the one scoring a finish. Here was some of what he had to say about why. He likes to move backwards, actually, but I might be the only guy that uses feints. That we're going to kick him the same way that he's going to kick me, and I have the advantage on wrestling and grappling too, so I think he'll always be in doubt if I'm going to put him down, and if I'm going to just trade punches with him. I'm going to put pressure and maybe get a good knockout or a good takedown, and definitely going to finish him. With all the respect always, but that's the way I see this fight going. Do you want to see this fight happen? And do you see Borralho taking out the former champ? Up next, Jon Jones praises Dana White. It wasn't that long ago that Jon Jones was at war with the UFC over his contract, and you were more likely to hear a unicorn signing than Jon Jones saying something nice about Dana White. But as of 2024, that has all changed. If you've followed MMA for a while now, you know that Jones and the UFC have had a rocky relationship at several points in his career, whether because of the many incidents outside of the cage or for how much money Jones should be paid. For example, some folks have forgotten that when Francis Ngannou was still in the UFC roster, Dana White blasted Bones over what he was allegedly asking for that fight. In fact, White argued at one point that it was Jones who was ducking Ngannou, not vice versa. Well, in the last year or so, Dana White and Jon Jones have clearly been aligned in the UFC's plans to have Bones fight Stipe Miocic next, even though an increasing number of people would rather see Jones throw hands with Tom Aspinall. And more recently, White has been ferociously defending his claim that Jones is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet, even though the heavyweight champ has fought just once since 2020. Whether it's an account of all this or not isn't entirely clear, but recently, Jon Jones heaped praise on White via social media. The legendary fighter said this: "You put Dana White in a business meeting with any man on this effing planet. There's only one man coming out on top. Real recognize real." So what's your reaction to Jones's comments here, given some of the previous disputes he's had with White and the UFC? Up next, Dan Hooker reflects on bad mistake. Following UFC 305, Dan Hooker is back in the title shot mix at lightweight, and it sounds like the Hangman is gonna plan his next steps very carefully. Hooker faced the grappling machine Mateusz Gamrot at the recent event and surprised many pundits by scoring a split decision win. With the key victory, the New Zealand contender now moves into the #5 ranking at the 155-pound division. Well, if you follow Hooker, you know that for much of his career, he's been willing to throw down with pretty much anyone. But recently, he told ESPN Australia that probably won't be the case moving forward at this stage of his career. Why? Well, the Hangman noted, "I kind of have learned that from my first rodeo is to just kind of not do anything dumb this time around. I mean, the last time I was #5, I agreed to fight Michael Chandler. Gave Michael Chandler a shot. It was his first fight in the UFC. I flew to Abu Dhabi, so the other side of the world, with absolutely no coaches, and went and fought him with a guy I'd been training for 6 months in my corner. It was not the smartest of decisions, so I guess this time around, I'm just not going to do anything dumb or sell my title shot again." If you need a refresher, Chandler starched Hooker not long into the fight with booming punches. So given Hooker's age and what he's had to do to get back into the title shot mix, it's hard to blame him for taking this approach. Umar Nurmagomedov shuts down backup role. Umar Nurmagomedov has made it abundantly clear he wants and expects to fight for the UFC's bantamweight crown. But the undefeated Dagestani fighter won't be heading to Las Vegas for UFC 306, just in case something happens to Sean O'Malley or Merab Dvalishvili. Nurmagomedov has moved into the number 2 ranking at 135 on account of his memorable win over longtime contender Corey Sandhagen on August 3rd. Leading up to the scrap, Umar said that a win would move him into a title fight, and he repeated that claim following the win. Well, since O'Malley is set to defend his title against Dvalishvili at UFC 306 on September 14, some have wondered if Umar could serve as the backup for the fight. But while talking to Daniel Cormier recently, the 28-year-old shot that possibility down and then some. Why would I be the backup fighter when I'm already the best in the world? Now, at the risk of wading too far into the semantic weeds here, most people probably don't think of the backup fighter in this case as necessarily the less talented or dangerous one. But you can also understand why, given Umar's position, agreeing to be the backup fighter just in case something happens would be less than ideal. Given Umar is very likely next for a title shot, it makes sense to wait and see who he'll be fighting and to tailor your training camp accordingly. It also seems clear the fact that it's going to take place at the Sphere in Vegas, he doesn't really care about that. That probably shouldn't surprise anyone. But what do you think? Should Umar have agreed to be a backup? The MMA community is concerned for UFC 306 after a new video emerges of Merab out partying and allegedly drinking just a few weeks out from the fight. Here's what the MMA community had to say. Merab Dvalishvili seems to be enjoying his time in Mexico drinking beer and doing shots. That's because he's getting pulled from the fight. Is he really drinking 1 week out? I hope this is pre-recorded. He's really making sure to sell this fight, lol. One fan speculated that Merab was drinking water, and this is a skit. Before people start thinking he's drinking 2 weeks out, look closely. Beer ain't translucent. Uncle Dana every time Merab posts on social media. Bro is drinking 2 weeks before the fight. Couldn't spar for like 2 weeks now. His training camp is effed, and he knows it. To those wondering, you can clearly see that it's not beer coming out of that bottle. Looks like water to me. Guy's such an used to like him until he's become a social media hope O'Malley KOs him. People think he's tripping, but I think he's not worried about Sean at all and thinks he'll beat him easy. Top comments. Jones could never beat Aspinall. Not in his prime. Not now. Not later. He couldn't finish the likes of Smith and Reyes while Tom is finishing people's twice their size in 1 minute. John saying he would maul Tom but proceeds to say he won't fight him. Jones and Dana have ruined any credibility the UFC had left not watching Jones versus Stipe. Volk should defo wait for the title shot, rest up and then go get the belt back.